Well, hello, everyone. I hope everybody is having a wonderful Monday. Welcome to the Impact Hour, a real talk with Aura Vasquez. I am so excited today to talk about Juneteenth. And this week, I'm bringing Voices of Change, a Juneteenth edition celebration here at the Impact Hour. So many of you know what Juneteenth is. Many of you are new to this celebration. And I wanted to bring some really good guest speakers to talk about how Juneteenth is shaping today's culture. What are some of the things that are happening in politics and social justice and in the Black community, and how these affect us. So I couldn't be more excited to be welcoming um, Kamilah Moore. She is the chair of the California Reparations Task Force. She will be telling us a little bit more about what this means and what this is. So if you have no idea what this work is about, you are here for a treat. Camila is an attorney. She's an expert, and we'll get to talk more about who she is in just a moment. But with no further ado, please help me welcome um, Kamilah Moore here to the Impact Hour. Hi and welcome. How are you?
Hello, Ada. So glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to, share, about Juneteenth and the work that California is doing on reparations with your amazing audience.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Camila, you and I just recently met. I was really honored to be sharing the same stage with you, and getting to know you. And for the audience that is just becoming acquainted to who you are and what you do, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to this work.
Absolutely, yes. So, born and raised in Los Angeles, California, Leimert Park, in particular. Kind of grew up, if you all know about Leimert Park, grew up in an environment that was very, conscious about, Black history, Black identity. And, I think that definitely, provided me with, kind of the roots and the foundation to do the work that I'm doing now as it relates to reparations. But, also grew up with stories passed down from my family about reparations, right? The concept of 40 acres and a mule, which we might talk about later today. Even as a child, I would read, at the library, narratives from enslaved people, right? Slave narratives. And
Mhm.
so, kind of in reflecting on the work that I've done as a chair of the California Reparations Task Force, and kind of like, how did I get there? I say it really started, as a child, but I went to college at UCLA and pretty active in student activism there. I was the chairperson of the African Student Union. I
Mm,
took a couple, yeah. So, I did a lot of work on, prison abolition, getting the university to divest, millions of dollars from corporations that were investing in private prisons. So I really come from that, activism background. But I went to law school actually with the express intention of, wanting to learn more about reparations and potentially use my law degree to help further this movement. But in between those 2 years, between UCLA and law school, for instance, I was a substitute teacher for LAUSD. I was doing a lot of nonprofit work. But eventually, I went to law school in New York City, and there, I studied more intensely, this concepts of reparations under domestic and international law, and graduated from law school in 2019. And the following year, moved back to California in 2020. That's when Governor Newsom signed this legislation called AB 3121 that created the Reparations Task Force. And so, just to conclude, anyone in the state could apply to that task force in 2020. I applied, and I leveraged the experience that I had just gained in law school, studying reparations for African Americans, and that's how essentially I was appointed by the Speaker of the California State Assembly, Anthony Rendon, to serve on the task force.
that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
I think it's really a testament of the work that you have done to really understand and better your community. I think in 2024 we have seen so many movements: Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, even defund the police. And how do we bring rights to people that were enslaved in this country and why that is also equally important. I have conversations with well-meaning people, good people, that don't understand why we need reparations. And I would like to ask also the audience that are watching to chime in on the comments and let us know what they think. I wanted to ask you this question because personally, and as Afro Latina, it takes me a while to kind of get people to come around to like, oh, there's an inequality. Do you know about the difference between equality and equity? But I would love to hear from you. What are some of the reasons why we need reparations today? If you have to explain to someone, and I think as a way to educate my audience and people that are listening and watching this live stream, why do we need reparations today?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. It's a question that, task force members get all the time. And, when we're talking about the state of California, that question obviously is asked a lot, even by well-meaning folks, because, people say, well, California was a free state. Why is California leading in this issue?
Right.
And so the task force, we've had to explain, well, we had to dispel the myth, for instance, or first of all, foremost, that California was a free state, right? We leaned on, right, the expert witness testimony of academics who committed their entire careers to dispelling this myth, right? Like Professor Stacy Smith out of Oregon State University, where she told us at a public hearing at the task force, right, that there were actually slavery in California. There was over 2,000 slaves in California. Yes, that's not as many as there was in the South, but, one is too many. So in essence, California as a government actually did sanction slavery, right? Not only were, there actual slave colonies in the state of California. San Bernardino County was one infamous slave colony here. But also, California also implemented a fugitive slave law in 1852, which actually it was pretty rare at the time for so-called free states to implement. So what that meant was, let's say you were enslaved and you tried to run away to California for refuge. You, under that fugitive slave law, could actually be deported to be, re-enslaved in the South, or in some instances, enslaved in California soil. But for a state like California, reparations is actually not just about slavery, right? So we have to start with that conversation, right? The institution of slavery. But reparations in California is also for what the California Reparations Task Force defined as those lingering badges and incidents of slavery, right? Those major areas of systemic discrimination that still persist in this society today, that lead to inequities in the African American community. So just to conclude, the task force, we identified 12 major areas of systemic discrimination that justify the need for reparations. That includes, for instance, political disenfranchisement, racial terror, racism in the environment and infrastructure, housing segregation, the wealth gap, the criminal legal system, the pathologizing of the Black family, and on and on and on. So in terms of our final report, it's over 1,100 pages, and it includes, right, data points that describes the harms, the atrocities that the state of California has perpetuated against African Americans disproportionately in these areas. And then the remaining report provides policy recommendations to, eradicate those lingering badges and incidents of slavery that I just described.
Interesting. And do you think that this is something that is welcome in both sides of the aisle per se? Do you think that this is something that people see is fair? I think it's about fairness. I think for a long time, African Americans, enslaved, didn't have much rights, didn't have that upper mobility. They couldn't buy things, right? They didn't own land. They couldn't vote. They couldn't do a lot of different things. So if it seems fair to me that now in a nation where we have, such wealth disparity, we will have some sort of mechanism to level the playfield. And especially with redlining, which I would love to hear more from you about how redlining is influencing this decision of reparations.
Yes.
I know that, we're in election time, and I think this is a pretty a strong, like, hot issue for a lot of people. So do you think that is supported by both parties, or the parties, let's say?
So that's a really great question. And I think in general, I think, Democrats and generally support the concept of reparations at way higher margins than Republicans. I don't think Republicans actually support
Mm.
reparations. And that's shown in the data. Actually, UC Berkeley Intergovernmental Studies came out with a poll last summer, polling 6,000 California voters across the varying political spectrums. And they asked these voters, three questions.
Mhm.
One, the question was, do you believe that, the legacy of slavery still, persists in the society and still, impacts African Americans? Do you think that the state is doing enough, too little, or too much for African Americans? Was the second question. And the third question was, do you support, cash payments, which was one of the recommendations from the task force? And
Mm.
yeah, so the major headline from that poll was that the majority of Californians actually do not support cash payments. They agree that the state is doing too little. Most of the folks polled agreed that the state is doing too little for Black people, and most of the folks polled believe that the legacy of slavery still persists and disproportionately impacts African Americans. But kind of both Democrats and Republicans were not in support of cash payments, but Republicans, were against it by 90%, while Democrats were in favor of cash payments by like 43%.
Mhm.
But I have to give credit to Democrats, right? California is a super Democratic state. We would not have had, the California Reparations Task Force if that legislation didn't pass by, majority Democrats. And there's various different legislation right now that's pending in the California State Legislature based on the task force's recommendations. And many of them have, most of them actually have passed in their varying stages, with flying colors again by Democrats. Um, but on
Interesting.
the
Eh,
yeah. Mhm.
no, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you want me to talk about the redlining piece.
I definitely want to hear about redlining, because for me
Okay.
is one of the most is the most tangible piece that we have about inequality and inequities in the United States. The
Mhm.
fact that even post slavery, we had policies that were hindering Black folks, people of color, from buying property in certain place, for getting loans. I
Yes.
mean, that's pretty serious. And I would love for you to talk about it, this piece about redlining, and what are some of the recommendations that the report, you guys, I know that you came up with a report, the task
Yeah.
force. What are some of the recommendations that you guys have in mind, or that you're proposing
Yes.
to alleviate and to level, the damage done to our community?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And so in our chapter on housing inequities, we talk about the government's role, state, local, municipal roles in perpetuating redlining, right? You can look at maps, as early as the 1930s in California. Essentially the effect of it were that African American neighborhoods were, like you said, systemically denied, right? Mortgages, housing insurance, which in effect, vastly lowered property values in African American communities and led to, historic, disinvestment.
Mhm.
Also today, right, African Americans have are actually less likely to own homes today than they were in 1910, right? In Los
Wow.
Angeles, for instance, and African Americans have the lowest rate of home ownership across all groups. And that is rooted in not only housing segregation and redlining, but other badges and incidents of slavery that we talk about as well. In terms of policy recommendations, interestingly enough, the task force we recommended For instance, that the state legislature create legislation that would provide property tax relief to descendants of slaves
Mm.
in formerly redline neighborhoods, right? To account and specifically rectify, the state of California's government's role in that. We also recommended for there to be legislation that would create grants for those who are descendants of slaves to purchase their first home or to help pay down their mortgage and to provide homeowners insurance, again, as a nearly tailored remedy to address, again, the California government's role in perpetuating redlining and housing segregation. State Senator Stephen Bradford, who was on the California Reparations Task Force, he actually introduced two pieces of legislation that would do just that. However, unfortunately, in the California state legislature suspense file hearing, both of those bills were effectively killed, citing the state's budget concerns. We're in a historic budget deficit in this
Deficit.
state. And unfortunately, those particular bills were killed this year, but the hope is that we can bring those back in the next legislative year.
I know it's interesting for me, and I'm not trying to be problematic here, but it feels to me it's kind of interesting that not long ago everybody got a stimulus check, but now when it comes to reparations for people of color, we don't have enough money. I'm just saying
Mm-hmm.
it happens way too often.
Yes.
But to get back on track and to set the room again,
Yes.
welcome everyone. I am here with Kamilah Moore. She is the chair of the California Reparations Task Force. We're celebrating Juneteenth, which is this week. I think it was very fitting to bring her to speak to us about what reparations are and how with shaping reparations in this modern era. So I want to invite all of you to also share your thoughts and your ideas in the comments, and you can also ask Kamilah questions by typing them in the comments. So, all right. So, I guess my next question for you is, we're celebrating Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
I was researching more about this holiday. It's interesting. Not a lot of people know what Juneteenth actually is, and it's quite ironic that in 2021 it became a federal holiday. It's the first African American holiday after Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, holiday, which
Yeah.
is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is a different take on Juneteenth for people that are like, are you telling me that we're celebrating the fact that enslaved people found out that they were enslaved? But I think that was the state of the land in those days. So what do you think is
Mm-hmm.
is, is the meaning of Juneteenth for you and for the work that you have been doing with the Reparation Task Force?
Right. Great question again. Growing up, I heard about celebrated Juneteenth, but the story that comes along with Juneteenth is just like what you said, right? This is the date that enslaved people in Texas found out that they were free. But also in kind of doing deeper research on this holiday recently as well. For instance, I was watching some videos of Juneteenth parades in Galveston, Texas, and there was a particular MC at that parade from the 1990s who was really educating me on the deeper history and knowledge of this holiday. And what I learned from him was it's actually a myth, or it's not necessarily true to say that Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, was the day that Texas enslaved folks learned that they were free. They knew
Hmm.
that they were free because the Emancipation Proclamation that President Lincoln had signed was in 1863,
Right.
2 years before, um, Juneteenth. And so what the real history is they knew that they were free. It was just that the enslavers in Texas wanted to keep their property for a little while longer.
Mm.
Right. So all the slaves were supposed to be free by 1863, but various different states in the South, the Confederate states, they technically have their own different emancipation dates because, again, they were very reluctant to, giving up their property. And so June 19th, 1865 actually marks the day that Union General Gordon Granger went to Texas to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. But enslaved folks, for the most part, knew that they were free. They were just, still in bondage, waiting for that Emancipation Proclamation to be enforced. And so, in reflecting on this history that I recently just found out, I think it just, for me, really deepens, for me, the need for repair, right, for reparations, right. To me, it's illustrative of the inconsistency, around, equal protection of the law as it relates to African Americans, which I think still persists today. Like, that's the root of why reparations is needed, because historically, this concept of equal protection under the law has inconsistently been applied to us.
Right.
From slavery to emancipation to now. And that's really what repair is about, is, reparations is about, is, ensuring that African Americans, those who descend from slaves, are afforded, equal protection under the law, and all the rights that are related to, full citizenship.
Absolutely. And I recently ran for office. I ran for city council in Los Angeles. And in my platform as a candidate, I used to talk about reparations have to be everywhere. We can't leave reparations for the state level to deal with it. If you are an employer, you can do some sort of form of reparations. If you are a teacher, whatever it is that in your life, I think is for all of us our duty to bring justice, and equality and equity to, in today's world. And I think a lot of people that maybe are listening to me right now are saying, like, wait, how do I, a regular folk, can bring separations to my life? And maybe we can have a conversation about this, because when I run, and even now, like, I try to be very mindful and intentional about who I hire. Are there, Black folks? Are they folks of color? I do tons of work on the environment. And I'm always, when you see the disparity on, for example, green spaces and parks, it's oftentimes where, people of color or African Americans live. And in my advocacy, I advocate for more open spaces and parks in these spaces. So what would be a suggestion that you have for people to bring reparations to their lives, and for them to also participate, and not wait for the city council, for the governor, but to also be part of the solution now that we have this concept that is fairly new?
It's a great question. I would say, I think it starts with, well, first, as a resource, I have to do a shameless plug, but it's no real shame. Utilizing the California Reparations Final Report as, a resource for folks to, look into, kind of study in terms of the intersections between whatever they're interested in, right, in their personal and professional lives with reparations, because the final report is so comprehensive. We talk about, various different industries, various different sectors and segments of society. And so I think the report, provides a really good entry point for folks who, want to get involved, and, may not know exactly how to get involved, or kind of where they fit in this conversation. So that could look like, I don't know, like, to your point, like, if you're interested in the environment, like, just searching environment in the final report and just seeing what pops up, you know what I mean? Or, if you're interested in sports or something like that, we have conversations in the report about sports and the intersection between reparations and sports. So, but other than that, there are great organizations out there that folks can tap into, that are dedicated to educating folks about reparations, and advocating for reparations as well. So I would definitely recommend that as well.
Beautiful. And we have some people in the audience saying, everyone can contribute to the reparations fight, even regular people. That's what we are, ordinary folks who want to see change. It's true. We can all advocate And I also want to invite folks that are listening to this conversation and maybe are not quite clear about what reparations are and how this works out. Because, I also get these comments. I don't know if this happened to you, Camila, sometimes when you start talking about reparations, they're like, well, what about these other people? And what about this other community? And and I want to invite people to expand a little bit of their view because we're not here to compete. I actually believe that there is plenty for everyone,
Yes.
and actually when we work together and we demand better practices or better policies for one, I feel like we all win. And that's important. That's important. So get with some books and find out there how this works. I also feel that people still have a hard time understanding the difference between equity and equality. And I think
Right.
reparations is at the core of understanding equity. So yeah, any books that you can recommend, or if you folks in the audience can recommend books or movies or such, please post them in the comments, or let us know how we can all become more educated. And especially this Juneteenth 2024, don't wait, learn, become more educated, because the more educated we are, the better off we all going to be. So Camila, do you have any suggestion for movies, books, anything fun that we need to check out?
Yes, actually, today I'm looking forward to National Geographic has a documentary out covering the story of descendants of enslaved Africans who were brought over here on a slave ship called Clotilda, and that ship was brought over to the United States after the United States formally abolished the slave trade, but you still have slave owners still bringing, enslaved folks from Africa to the United States after that law. So that's on National Geographic tonight. I think at 9, later on in the evening, essentially. But other than that, yes, there's definitely books that I would definitely recommend. Black Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois. He talks about reparations in the form of permanent institutions. Like we once had the Freedmen's Bureau in this country, but that was very short lived, right? It only lasted just 7 years, if that. But W.E.B. Du Bois in Black Reconstruction argued that that type of institution should be permanent, kind of similar to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, right? To ensure the equal protection of descendants of slaves in this country. And so that's why, for instance, in California, State Senator Stephen Bradford has introduced legislation to create a new state agency called the California American Freedmen Affairs Agency that pays homage to the Freedmen's Bureau that once existed on a national level and would do similar work for descendants of slaves as well. Callie House, there's a book called Mary Frances Berry called My Face is Black is True, which is about a woman named Callie House who was enslaved, and she created one of the largest grassroots organizations in the early 1900s, petitioning the federal government for pensions or cash reparations for literally ex-slaves, people who were slaves in their lifetime. And that book talks about various different challenges that she met. In fact, the federal government, the FBI, and the U.S. Postal Office actually charged her with mail fraud.
Wow.
For her advocacy work, saying that she was defrauding her members of the organization under this idea that she could get reparations for them, when essentially she knew the federal government said that that really was never going to be a possibility, and she was actually incarcerated for a year. And after that, she was released, and her organization kind of was dismantled, and then she died soon after of cervical cancer. So I bring up stories of Callie House to say, for the naysayers who say, well, you guys should have fought for reparations back then, when there were actual slaves living, like we did, and we were. Our ancestors were, shot down, and every
Yeah.
sense of the word. Yeah.
Somebody posted here in the comments The Color of Law
Oh,
by
yes.
Richard Rothstein. Yeah. So I
That's a
see
great one too.
a lot of great recommendations. Well, It's been so great having you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about reparations and what California is doing. If people want to learn more about what the task force is doing or get involved, what do they need to do?
Yes. So definitely, you can, I think, follow organizations. I just mentioned some great organizations like CJEC, the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. They have a
Mhm.
coalition of different organizations called Californians Organizing for Reparations. You can look on Instagram. Their Instagram is CJEC Official. There's the other organization called LEAP, Lineage Equity Advancement Project, that is doing
Mhm.
great work as well in the state and federally on reparations for descendants of slaves. So I would say support those organizations as well. And I've already mentioned, you can go to the task force's website. It is on the California DOJ's, website for perpetuity. So you can go anytime to look at past hearings and to, review our final report. But then also, I have a website that I'm maintaining where I'm starting to provide updates on where we are in terms of reparations. And that website is called californiareparations.info. So if you subscribe to that mailing list, I will share resources related to the legislation, but also resources so you can tap into those organizations like CJEC and LEAP that I mentioned. And if you want to just keep up with me, I have a website as well called KamilahMoore.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And before I go, how are you celebrating Juneteenth this year?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, how are we celebrating, I guess?
Well, I wanted to go to the Kendrick Lamar concert, but literally at the same, because he's having a concert in Inglewood at the Forum, but literally at the same time, I'm excited about this. I'm going to be on a panel around the intersection between reparations and intellectual property, right, for artists and creatives, because I'm also an entertainment attorney. So that panel is going to be at USC Law School Wednesday, 4:30 to 6:30. So that's how I'll be celebrating. And then later on that night, I'll be flying to New York City because I have a panel the next day on reparations at Fordham Law School on the intersection between human rights and reparations. So I'm celebrating by educating, I guess.
I love it. I love it. So, if people want to keep up with you on social media, how they can find you, what are your handles?
Yes, across social media, I think it's Kamilah V. Moore on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, Camila, thank you so much. It was lovely having you. Thank you for all the work that you do, educating people about the importance of reparations, what reparations are. Thank you for fighting.
Thank
This
you.
is not easy for investing all the time that you put into this work. I want to, personally thank you for taking, so much passion and love to continue this legacy and this important work so necessary in the community.
Yes. And thank you so much for the opportunity and everything that you do as well. And maybe next time we can talk about what's going on in Colombia for Afro Colombians and stuff
Oh
like
my
that.
God, yes. And we haven't Petronio, which is like a music festival that is very important for Afro Latinos. And also for the first time, we're hosting the Cup in Biodiversity this year in Colombia in October. So, people always ask me, oh wow, you're such a strong environmental justice activist. Where does it come from? And I'm like, it's part of my DNA. Like I feel like in Colombia we all somewhat, conservationists, environmentalists, and we love nature, and it's such an honor. So yes, next time we need to catch up about what's happening in Latin America in terms of reparations. I would love that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again, Ada.
All right, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. All right, friends, that was Kamilah Moore is speaking to us about reparations in California. She's the chair of the California Reparations Task Force. I want to thank everyone for being here. We had such good turnout today. I hope that you guys learn tons and the conversation continues always online. Please share this live stream and this podcast with your friends and people that you know and with your networks. Because, as I said earlier, the more activated and the better educated that we one are, the better we all are. So thank you so much. You can find my podcast on Spotify, The Impact Hour. I also have a Patreon, and you can find me as Aura Vasquez, The Impact Hour, and support our work because it's important. And the purpose of this podcast is always to educate, to bring awareness, and to activate folks. So thank you so much. This is Aura Vasquez, and I hope to see you soon tomorrow again as we speak to Gambo, a hip hop duet from Los Angeles that is pretty amazing. They have new release music, and they're gonna tell us more about who they are and and how they're bringing hip hop and justice and a new voice and impact voices of change to our community. All right, guys, this is it. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.